Good evening, dear listeners. As the day gently fades into the tranquility of night, we invite you to settle into a comfortable space, where the world outside can drift softly away. Close your eyes if you wish, and let the soothing cadence of our words cradle your mind. This journey we are about to embark upon is designed not just to enlighten, but to lull you into a serene state, perfect for rest and relaxation. Tonight, we will explore the meticulous and often overlooked history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines. While the topic may seem intricate and perhaps even tedious, allow the gentle rhythm of our exploration to wash over you like a soft breeze on a warm evening. We will wander through the arid landscapes of ancient Egypt, where the mighty Nile nurtured a civilization that cherished knowledge and preserved its wisdom in the delicate fibers of papyrus. As we delve into this historical tapestry, we will uncover the intriguing processes the ancient Egyptians employed to safeguard their scrolls, each one a vessel of thought, a fragment of their vibrant society. We will discuss the art of archiving, a practice that speaks to the heart of human curiosity and the desire to remember. From the creation of scrolls, carefully crafted from the papyrus plant, to the meticulous methods employed in their storage, we will guide you through the gentle unfolding of this ancient tradition. You will learn about the various techniques used to catalog these invaluable documents, revealing the care and foresight of the scribes who dedicated their lives to preserving knowledge. Their careful hand movements, the subtle ink strokes, and the fragrant aroma of papyrus will come alive in your mind's eye, inviting you to picture the bustling scriptoriums of old. With each word, allow the soothing sounds and images to envelop you, creating a cocoon of calm that prepares you for a peaceful night's rest. In our journey, we will touch upon the significance of scrolls in ancient Egyptian society, how they were not merely records of transactions or historical events, but rather, reflections of their beliefs, culture, and dreams. As we explore the cataloging timelines, you will discover how the ancient Egyptians organized their wealth of knowledge, creating systems that echoed through the ages and influenced later civilizations. Throughout this narrative, let the tranquil flow of history guide you to a place of relaxation, where the worries of the day can dissolve into the fabric of time. Your mind may wander, and that is perfectly all right. Embrace those gentle thoughts as they come, but let them drift away as we focus on the soothing rhythm of our story. As we prepare to dive deeper into the intricate world of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving, take a moment to breathe deeply. Inhale the calmness of the evening air, and exhale any lingering tension. Feel the weight of the day lift from your shoulders, allowing yourself to be fully present in this moment of serene storytelling. With each gentle whisper of history, allow the soothing narrative to guide you gently into a state of relaxation, where the past and the present intertwine in perfect harmony. Our exploration of the tedious, yet fascinating, history of papyrus scrolls will soon begin, inviting you to drift further into the peaceful embrace of knowledge and sleep. Let us now transition into the main content, where the ancient art of archiving will unfold like the scrolls themselves, revealing the wisdom of centuries long past. Close your eyes and let the story begin. The origins of papyrus scroll archiving in ancient Egypt can be traced back to the early dynastic period, specifically around 3000 BCE, when the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the rule of Pharaoh Narmer initiated a complex administrative system, This period marked the beginning of record-keeping practices that would evolve into a sophisticated method of archiving and cataloging papyrus scrolls. The city of Memphis, established as the capital around this time, served as a vital administrative center for the burgeoning bureaucracy. Evidence suggests that the first significant use of papyrus as a writing material occurred in the 4th dynasty, circa 2575 to 2465 BCE, when Pharaoh Khufu commissioned monumental architectural projects, including the Great Pyramid of Giza. These projects necessitated meticulous record-keeping to monitor the distribution of labor, resources, and materials. The use of papyrus scrolls for documenting such information became increasingly prevalent, leading to the establishment of formal archiving protocols. By the 5th dynasty, circa 2465 to 2325 BCE, the practice of documenting administrative procedures had become more formalized. The hieroglyphic writing system was employed on papyrus scrolls, which were produced from the papyrus plant, Papyrus papyrus, that thrived along the banks of the Nile River. The harvesting of papyrus was typically conducted during the summer months when the plant reached maturity. The stems were cut, processed, and then laid out in a manner that allowed for the extraction of thin strips, which were subsequently pressed together to form sheets. The architectural details of the storage facilities for these scrolls were quite rudimentary in the early periods. Initially, scrolls were stored in wooden boxes or chests, which were often made of cedar or sycamore wood, materials that were readily available in the region. By the Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, the storage facilities began to take on more defined architectural characteristics. The construction of administrative buildings, such as the mortuary temples and the grand storage rooms within the royal palaces, provided designated areas for the archiving of papyrus scrolls. During the reign of Pharaoh Amenemhat II, circa 1929 to 1895 BCE, the administrative protocols regarding papyrus scroll archiving began to take shape. The first known reference to systematic cataloging appears in inscriptions from this period, indicating a need for standardized administrative practices. The roles of scribes, who were highly trained individuals responsible for writing and record-keeping, became more defined as they were tasked with the organization and maintenance of scroll archives. Daily routines within the administrative offices involved meticulous attention to detail. Scribes would arrive early in the morning, often before sunrise, to begin their work. The first task of the day typically involved reviewing scrolls from the previous day, assessing their condition, and categorizing them according to specific administrative functions, such as taxation, labor management, or agricultural records. This early form of cataloging was rudimentary and often conducted without a comprehensive system, leading to inefficiencies. By the New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, the archiving protocols had undergone significant refinement. The establishment of the House of Life, a temple-based institution dedicated to the preservation of knowledge, played a crucial role in the evolution of papyrus scroll archiving. Located within the precincts of major temples, such as the Temple of Karnak in Thebes, these institutions became repositories for scrolls containing religious texts, literature, and administrative records. The administrative procedures for archiving scrolls in the New Kingdom were characterized by an increased emphasis on organization and categorization. The introduction of a more systematic cataloging timeline allowed for improved tracking of scrolls. Scribes utilized a method of labeling and indexing scrolls, often inscribing titles or summaries on the outer layer of the scroll to facilitate retrieval. This method, while not standardized across all administrative offices, represented a significant advancement in the archiving process. The daily routines of scribes during the New Kingdom included the meticulous copying of texts onto new scrolls, a practice necessary to preserve the information contained within aged or damaged scrolls. It was common for scribes to work in pairs, with one individual reading from the original scroll while the other transcribed the text onto a new sheet of papyrus. This practice not only ensured the preservation of important documents but also facilitated the dissemination of knowledge across different administrative bodies. By the time of Pharaoh Ramses II, circa 1279 to 1213 BCE, the archiving and cataloging of papyrus scrolls had reached a level of complexity that necessitated the establishment of specialized roles within the administrative framework. The title of chief scribe emerged, denoting an individual responsible for overseeing the entire archiving process. This position required a deep understanding of both the content of the scrolls and the protocols governing their storage and retrieval. Architectural advancements during this period also contributed to the preservation of papyrus scrolls. The construction of climate-controlled storage facilities within the administrative buildings allowed for better protection of scrolls against the elements, particularly humidity and temperature fluctuations. These facilities were often designed with thick mud brick walls and small windows to minimize exposure to external conditions that could cause deterioration. The cataloging timelines established during Ramses II's reign included specific intervals for reviewing and updating the archives. Every 5 years, a comprehensive audit of the scrolls would be conducted, during which scribes would assess the condition of each scroll, update cataloging information, and replace any deteriorating papyrus with fresh materials. This practice not only ensured the longevity of the scrolls but also reinforced the importance of record-keeping within the administrative hierarchy. The use of seals and stamps became more prevalent during this period as a means of authenticating documents. Scribes would often apply a seal to the outer layer of a scroll, indicating its origin and purpose. This practice further streamlined the retrieval process, as scrolls could be quickly identified based on their seals, thereby reducing the time required for administrative functions. The decline of the New Kingdom and the subsequent periods of foreign rule, beginning with the Assyrian invasions in the 8th century BCE, introduced new challenges to the established archiving protocols. While the tradition of papyrus scroll archiving continued, the administrative structures became fragmented, leading to inconsistencies in cataloging practices. The influence of foreign powers, such as the Persians and later the Greeks, necessitated adaptations to the existing protocols, as new administrative practices and languages were introduced. During the Ptolemaic period, circa 332 to 30 BCE, the Library of Alexandria emerged as a critical institution for the archiving of papyrus scrolls. This library was renowned for its vast collection of texts and its commitment to knowledge preservation. The administrative procedures in place at the library were a culmination of centuries of evolution in scroll archiving. The library employed a comprehensive cataloging system, which included an indexing method that allowed scholars to locate texts efficiently. The daily routines of the librarians at Alexandria involved the careful organization of scrolls according to subject matter and author. Each scroll was meticulously labeled and entered into a catalog, which was often inscribed on a larger scroll for easy reference. This practice marked a significant advancement in the archiving of texts, as it allowed for cross-referencing and the development of a more cohesive body of knowledge. The decline of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the advent of Roman rule introduced further complexities to the archiving protocols. The Roman administrative system adopted certain aspects of Egyptian practices, but also imposed their own methodologies, leading to a hybridization of techniques. The introduction of Latin as a language of administration resulted in the gradual phasing out of hieroglyphic texts, with a focus on the translation and transcription of existing scrolls into Latin. The final centuries of papyrus scroll archiving in ancient Egypt were characterized by a decline in the production and preservation of scrolls. The increasing use of alternative materials, such as parchment, coupled with the socio-political upheavals of the time, ultimately led to the obsolescence of the papyrus scroll as a primary medium for record-keeping. However, the legacy of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines continued to influence subsequent civilizations, laying the groundwork for future systems of knowledge preservation. In conclusion, the history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines is a testament to the evolution of administrative practices over millennia. From the rudimentary methods employed in the early dynastic period to the sophisticated systems established during the New Kingdom and beyond, the meticulous attention to detail, daily routines, and architectural innovations reflect the significance of record-keeping in ancient Egyptian society. Though the mediums and methods have changed over time, the fundamental principles of organization and preservation remain relevant in contemporary archival practices. The construction methods and materials utilized in the creation of papyrus scrolls during the ancient Egyptian era are of paramount significance to understanding the archival practices of the time. Papyrus, derived from the pith of the Papyrus papyrus plant, was cultivated primarily in the Nile Delta, with significant production occurring around the city of Heracleopolis as early as 3000 BCE. The process of transforming this plant into a usable writing surface involved several meticulous steps. Initially, the outer green rind of the Papyrus stalk was stripped away, exposing the inner pith. This pith was then cut into thin strips, approximately 5 to 10 centimeters in width, and laid side by side in a horizontal manner. Subsequently, additional strips were placed vertically, resulting in a crisscross pattern. This arrangement was pivotal for the structural integrity of the scroll. The overlaid strips were then pressed together, either by manual compression or by utilizing flat stones, and subjected to moisture, typically from the Nile River, to facilitate adhesion. The resultant sheets were dried in the sun for several days. Once dried, the sheets were often polished using smooth stones, enhancing their writing surface. The final dimensions of a typical papyrus sheet could vary, with standard sheets measuring approximately 30 centimeters in width and up to 3 meters in length. Longer scrolls could be created by adhering multiple sheets together with a paste made from flour and water, allowing for greater length suitable for extensive documentation. Maintenance procedures for papyrus scrolls were crucial to their longevity. Due to their organic nature, these scrolls were susceptible to deterioration from environmental factors, such as humidity, sunlight, and pest infestations. Archival practices therefore included storing scrolls in wooden boxes, often lined with linen, to mitigate exposure to moisture. These boxes were typically made from cedar wood, known for its resistance to decay and pests, and were sealed with a mixture of resin and wax to provide further protection. Additionally, scrolls were frequently inspected for signs of wear, such as fading ink or fraying edges. Specific restoration methods were employed, including the careful regluing of torn sections with a mixture of starch paste and water. The use of linen strips to reinforce weak areas of the scroll was also common. These strips were meticulously sewn onto the scroll using fine threads made from flax. Such maintenance tasks were often conducted by designated personnel within the archival institution, reflecting a structured approach to preservation. Financial records and costs associated with the production and maintenance of papyrus scrolls provide insight into the economic aspects of ancient Egyptian archiving. The price of papyrus fluctuated significantly based on demand and quality, with average costs recorded in various administrative documents. For instance, during the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep II, circa 1427 to 1400 BCE, the cost of high-quality papyrus was approximately 20 devon per sheet, while lesser-quality papyrus was priced at around 10 devon. The devon, a unit of weight equivalent to around 91 grams, was commonly used for trade throughout ancient Egypt. In addition to the cost of raw materials, the financial records of archives included expenditures for labor. Craftsmen responsible for the manufacturing of papyrus scrolls, known as papyrus makers, could earn a wage of approximately 5 devon per month. The labor force employed in archival settings often included scribes, who were skilled in the art of writing and bookkeeping. Scribes were typically compensated with a salary that ranged from 15 to 30 devon monthly, depending on their level of expertise and the complexity of their work. The personnel involved in the archiving of papyrus scrolls included various specialized roles. At the top of the hierarchy was the chief scribe, responsible for overseeing the entire archival process, including the organization, cataloging, and maintenance of scrolls. This individual was expected to possess extensive knowledge of hieroglyphic writing and administrative protocols. The chief scribe often reported directly to high-ranking officials or priests, ensuring that the archival practices adhered to both bureaucratic and religious standards. Supporting the chief scribe were a team of scribes and junior scribes. The scribes were responsible for the actual writing and copying of documents, while junior scribes assisted in clerical tasks, such as preparing materials and maintaining records. Their duties included transcribing legal documents, recording inventory, and documenting transactions. Each scribal position required extensive training, often commencing in childhood, where students would learn the intricacies of hieroglyphs, grammar, and the art of composition. In addition to scribes, there were papyrus makers, who specialized in the cultivation and processing of the papyrus plant. Their role was vital in ensuring a steady supply of quality papyrus for archival use. Papyrus makers often worked closely with farmers, coordinating the harvest seasons and determining optimal cultivation practices to ensure the best yield. The technical specifications of papyrus scrolls varied based on their intended use. For instance, legal documents would typically employ a specific format. A standard scroll width of 25 to 30 centimeters was preferred, as it allowed for a sufficient amount of text while remaining manageable. In contrast, religious texts, such as the Book of the Dead, often required longer scrolls, sometimes extending up to 5 meters, to accommodate extensive illustrations and annotations. The inks used for writing on papyrus were typically composed of carbon black or ochre mixed with water and a binding agent, such as gum arabic. The quality of ink was critical; it needed to adhere to the papyrus without smudging or fading. The average width of scribal strokes was approximately 1 mm, providing clear readability while allowing for aesthetic flourishes common in religious and literary manuscripts. Cataloging timelines for papyrus scrolls were established to facilitate easy retrieval and organization. The earliest known cataloging methods date back to the Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE. Records were often stored in a systematic manner, with scrolls grouped by subject matter or type. For example, administrative documents were categorized separately from literary works, with unique identifiers assigned to each scroll. By the Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, more sophisticated cataloging systems emerged, including the use of hieratic script for inventory lists. These lists, inscribed on stone tablets or additional papyrus scrolls, contain detailed descriptions of each item, including title, author, if known, and date of creation. Each entry was systematically numbered, allowing for efficient cross-referencing during retrieval. The practice of cataloging continued to evolve throughout the New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, when the introduction of more complex bureaucratic systems necessitated precise record-keeping. The use of seals to mark the authenticity and ownership of scrolls became common, as did the implementation of centralized storage facilities, often located adjacent to temples or administrative centers, ensuring that valuable documents were protected and systematically archived. In conclusion, the ancient Egyptian approach to papyrus scroll archiving was characterized by meticulous construction methods, detailed maintenance procedures, and structured financial records, all supported by a specialized workforce. The technical specifications of the scrolls, paired with the development of cataloging timelines, underscore the complexity and sophistication of archival practices in ancient Egypt. Such practices not only served to preserve knowledge for future generations but also reflected the broader societal values surrounding literacy, documentation, and the importance of record-keeping and maintaining order within the ancient Egyptian civilization. The construction methods and materials utilized in the formation of papyrus scrolls in ancient Egypt were meticulously developed over centuries, beginning as early as 3000 BCE. The primary material, papyrus, was derived from the Cyperus papyrus plant, which thrived in the marshy regions along the Nile River. Harvesting occurred during the inundation period, approximately from June to September, when the plant was at its most abundant. The stalks were cut into lengths ranging from 1 to 3 meters, depending on the intended size of the scroll. The initial step in the construction process involved stripping the outer green rind of the stalk, revealing the inner pith. This pith was then sliced into thin strips, typically measuring around 1 to 2 centimeters in width. These strips were laid out in parallel on a flat surface, and additional strips were placed perpendicularly on top, creating a lattice-like structure. The two layers were then pressed together, often using a wooden mallet or stone slab, to facilitate adhesion through the natural juices of the papyrus pith. This pressing process was crucial, as it ensured that the fibers bonded effectively, creating a durable writing surface. Once the layers were bonded, the resulting sheet was dried under the sun for several days, after which it was polished, often with a smooth stone, to create a finer writing surface. The completed sheets varied in size but typically measured 25 to 30 centimeters in width and could extend up to several meters in length. The scrolls were then rolled up, with the writing surface on the inside to prevent damage, and secured with twine made from flax or papyrus fibers. Maintenance procedures for these scrolls were integral to their longevity and usability. The ancient Egyptians understood that exposure to environmental factors such as humidity, heat, and light could deteriorate the scrolls over time. Consequently, scrolls were often stored in wooden cases, which provided a protective barrier against these elements. The cases were typically crafted from sycamore or cedar wood and exhibited various designs, sometimes adorned with hieroglyphs that identified the contents within. Routine inspections were conducted to assess the condition of the scrolls. These inspections often involved checking for signs of fading ink, mold, or physical damage. In the event of deterioration, basic repair techniques were employed. For instance, frayed edges were often trimmed and reinforced with additional strips of papyrus, while fading text might be augmented using a mixture of soot and water to recreate the original ink. Financial records and costs associated with the production and maintenance of papyrus scrolls provide insight into the economic aspects of ancient Egyptian society. The price of papyrus varied across different periods, influenced by factors such as demand, availability, and the political stability of the region. During the New Kingdom period, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, the cost of a single sheet of papyrus was approximately 1 deben, a unit of weight equivalent to around 91 grams of silver. This price would fluctuate based on the quality of the papyrus, with finer sheets commanding higher prices. Moreover, the cost of ink, typically derived from carbon black mixed with water, was another consideration. A small container of ink could cost around 1/3 of a deben. Scribes, who played a pivotal role in the production of scrolls, were often compensated based on the quantity of work they produced. A skilled scribe could earn between 2 to 4 deben per month, depending on their expertise and the complexity of the texts they were tasked with transcribing. Personnel involved in the papyrus scroll archiving processes were essential to the organization and preservation of written records. The primary figure in this hierarchy was the scribe, responsible for both the creation and maintenance of documents. Scribes underwent extensive training, often starting from a young age, typically around 6 or 7, and they attended formal schools known as houses of life. The curriculum included lessons on hieroglyphics, mathematics, and the administration of various forms of record keeping. In addition to scribes, the role of archivists emerged as a distinct profession within the administrative framework. These individuals were tasked with overseeing the organization of scrolls within storage facilities, ensuring that documents were catalogued accurately and accessible for retrieval. Archivists often worked closely with scribes to maintain accurate inventories of scrolls, detailing their contents, condition, and locations within the archives. The documentation of personnel roles extended to the role of the overseer of scribes, a position held by a high-ranking official responsible for supervising the activities of the scribes and archivists. This overseer ensured that the protocols for record-keeping were adhered to and that the integrity of the documents was maintained. Their position often required a thorough understanding of both legal and religious texts, as many scrolls contain vital information regarding land ownership, taxation, and temple records. Technical specifications regarding the production of papyrus scrolls were governed by a series of established norms. The writing instruments utilized were primarily reed pens, crafted from the pith of the papyrus plant, which allowed for both fine and broad strokes. The ink used was typically a carbon-based mixture that provided durability and resistance to fading. The average writing surface of a scroll could accommodate approximately 20 to 30 lines of text per meter, with an ink application thickness of about 0.5 millimeters. The writing system employed was predominantly hieroglyphic, although cursive forms such as hieratic were also used for more utilitarian documents. The choice of script often depended on the scroll's purpose. Religious texts were frequently inscribed in more formal hieroglyphs, while administrative records were commonly transcribed in the more rapid cursive style. In terms of organization and cataloging, each scroll was assigned a unique identifier, often inscribed at the beginning or end of the document. This identifier typically included the title of the work, the author's name, and a brief description of the contents. The archivists employed a systematic categorization method, grouping scrolls by subject matter, such as religious texts, legal documents, literary works, or medical treatises. The cataloging timelines were equally regimented, with regular updates conducted at the beginning of each inundation period, coinciding with the Egyptian calendar. This annual review ensured that any new scrolls produced throughout the year were properly documented within the existing archives. Following these reviews, a report was compiled, summarizing the conditions of the scrolls and any necessary repairs or replacements. In conclusion, the ancient Egyptian protocols for papyrus scroll archiving were characterized by a meticulous attention to detail and an understanding of the importance of documentation within their society. From the construction methods and materials used to create the scrolls to the careful maintenance procedures and the economic implications of their production, each aspect reflected the broader values of ancient Egyptian civilization. The personnel involved in these processes, including scribes, archivists, and their supervisors, played a crucial role in ensuring that the rich repository of knowledge contained within these scrolls was preserved for future generations. This comprehensive approach to record-keeping not only facilitated administrative efficiency but also underscored the significance of literacy and documentation in maintaining social order and continuity in ancient Egypt. The construction methods and materials employed in the production of papyrus scrolls were integral to the efficacy of ancient Egyptian record-keeping. Papyrus, derived from the Cyperus papyrus plant, was cultivated primarily in the Nile Delta region, particularly around the city of Memphis, where the wet conditions were most conducive to its growth. The harvesting of the plant typically occurred between late summer and early autumn, specifically from July to September, when the plants reached an optimal height of 3 to 4 meters. Once harvested, the stems of the papyrus plant were processed through a series of meticulous steps. The outer rind of the stems was removed to expose the inner pith, which was then cut into thin strips, approximately 1 to 2 centimeters wide. These strips were subsequently soaked in water for a period of 3 to 4 days to facilitate the softening of the fibers. After soaking, the strips were laid out side by side in a horizontal orientation, followed by a second layer of strips placed vertically on top. This crossed arrangement allowed for the natural adhesive properties of the papyrus fibers to bond together when pressed. The layered strips were then subjected to a heavy weight, often a large stone or wooden beam, for a duration of 24 to 48 hours to ensure a firm adhesion. Once the sheets had dried, they were smoothed using a rounded tool, often made from polished stones or pieces of wood, to create a uniform writing surface. The final dimensions of the individual sheets typically ranged from 25 to 30 centimeters in width and could extend up to 5 meters in length when joined to form a scroll. The most common configuration for a scroll comprised approximately 10 to 20 sheets, yielding a total length of 1 to 15 meters, depending on the intended use. In terms of maintenance procedures, the longevity of papyrus scrolls was paramount to ensure their continued utility in archiving. Given the environmental conditions of ancient Egypt, which included high temperatures and varying humidity levels, scrolls were susceptible to deterioration. To mitigate this, proper storage conditions were essential. Scrolls were typically stored in wooden boxes or niches, crafted from local hardwood such as acacia or sycamore, which provided a protective barrier against pests and moisture. The boxes often featured tight-fitting lids to prevent dust accumulation and exposure to direct sunlight, which could cause fading and brittleness. Regular inspections of the scrolls were mandated, typically undertaken by designated archivists or scribes. These personnel were responsible for assessing the physical condition of the scrolls and performing necessary repairs. Such repairs often involved the application of a fine paste made from flour and water to mend tears or breaks in the papyrus. Additionally, scrolls that exhibited signs of mold or insect damage were carefully cleaned using soft brushes and, when necessary, re-encased in new protective coverings made from linen or leather. Financial records related to the production and maintenance of papyrus scrolls provide a comprehensive view of the economic implications of the archival system. The cost of procuring papyrus varied based on quality and availability, with premium-grade papyrus selling for around 10 deben per large roll, approximately 1.6 kilograms of copper, during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II around 1250 BCE. The production costs associated with scroll-making included labor expenses for harvesting, processing, and crafting, which were typically borne by state-sponsored labor crews or private enterprises. In terms of labor, the personnel involved in the papyrus scroll archiving process consisted of various roles, each with specific job descriptions and responsibilities. The primary position was that of the scribe, who was charged with the transcription of texts onto the scrolls. Scribes were trained in the complex hieroglyphic writing system and were often educated from a young age in the schools associated with temples or royal households. Their training included mastery of both hieroglyphs and hieratic script, with a focus on precision and aesthetic presentation. In addition to scribes, the role of the archivist was crucial. Archivists were tasked with overseeing the organization and cataloging of scrolls within the storage facilities. Their duties included maintaining accurate records of the scroll's contents, assigning unique identifiers to each scroll, and ensuring that all materials were stored in accordance with established protocols. This role was particularly emphasized during the 18th dynasty, when the complexity of record-keeping intensified due to administrative expansions. Technical specifications for archival facilities were dictated by the prevailing architectural practices of the time. Most storage areas were constructed with thick mud brick walls to regulate temperature and humidity, and were often located in shaded areas to minimize exposure to the sun. The interiors of these facilities featured multiple shelves, crafted from wood, that allowed for the vertical stacking of scrolls. Each shelf was typically 1.5 meters in height, with a spacing of 30 centimeters between each level to accommodate the scroll's dimensions. The design of the storage spaces included a centralized clerical area where scribes and archivists could efficiently access the scrolls for reference or transcription. Lighting was provided through small openings in the walls, which minimized fluctuations in temperature while allowing sufficient illumination for reading and writing. The floors were often layered with fine sand or clay to reduce dust accumulation, further preserving the scroll's condition. As the archiving system developed, particularly during the Ptolemaic period, 332 to 30 BCE, the need for standardized cataloging procedures became increasingly apparent. The introduction of index systems allowed for quick retrieval of scrolls based on their subject matter or author, enhancing the efficiency of information management. These systems typically utilized a combination of hieroglyphic labels on the scroll's exterior and corresponding entries in ledger books, meticulously maintained by archivists. The financial implications of maintaining such elaborate archiving systems were significant. By the late Ptolemaic period, it is estimated that the annual budget allocated for papyrus procurement and archival maintenance reached approximately 200 talents of silver, a substantial sum reflective of the importance of documentation within the administrative framework of ancient Egypt. This expenditure was justified by the enhanced ability to manage tax records, legal documents, and historical chronicles, which were essential for the functioning of the state. The evolution of papyrus scroll construction and archiving protocols over the centuries illustrates a broader narrative of increasing complexity in ancient Egyptian society. From the rudimentary record-keeping practices of the early dynastic period to the sophisticated systems employed during the Ptolemaic era, the meticulous attention to detail in construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial documentation, personnel roles, and technical specifications reflects the profound significance of written records in sustaining the socio-political order of ancient Egypt. The legacy of these practices, though often overlooked in favor of more glamorous aspects of ancient Egyptian culture, remains a testament to the enduring importance of literacy and documentation in human civilization. The construction methods and materials employed in the manufacturing of papyrus scrolls during the ancient Egyptian period were integral to the overall archiving process. Papyrus, which is derived from the pith of the Cyperus papyrus plant, flourished along the banks of the Nile River. The harvesting of this plant typically occurred during the summer months, particularly between June and August, when the stalks reached their optimal height of approximately 3 to 4 meters. Once harvested, the outer green rind of the stalk was stripped away, exposing the inner pith. This pith was then cut into thin strips, measuring approximately 2 to 3 centimeters in width and 30 to 50 centimeters in length. The strips were laid side by side on a flat surface, slightly overlapping, and then additional strips were placed on top in a perpendicular orientation. This cross-lamination process was critical for enhancing the scroll's structural integrity. A light hammering was often employed to compress the layers, ensuring a bond through the natural sap present in the pith. Following the layering, the assembled sheets were then pressed under a weight or stone for several days to facilitate drying. After the drying period, the sheets were smoothed with a burnishing tool, commonly made of polished stone or wood, to achieve a writing surface suitable for ink application. The final product was a flexible sheet, which could vary in size but typically measured around 25 to 30 centimeters in width and could extend up to 10 meters in length when unrolled. The maintenance of these papyrus scrolls was equally vital to preserving their content for future generations. Scrolls were stored in wooden or papyrus tubes, often coated with resin to provide a moisture barrier, thus protecting against the humid conditions prevalent in parts of Egypt. The storage facilities, known as houses of papyrus, were often constructed in shaded areas to minimize exposure to direct sunlight, which could cause fading and deterioration of the ink. Regular inspections were conducted, usually on a biannual basis, to assess the condition of the scrolls. Any signs of mold or insect infestation prompted immediate action, often involving the removal of affected scrolls to specially designated treatment areas where they could be restored using mixtures of honey and water, known for their preservative properties. Important scrolls were often treated with oils derived from various plants to enhance their resilience against environmental factors. The financial records concerning papyrus scroll production and maintenance reveal a meticulous approach to budgeting and resource allocation, essential for the sustainability of archiving practices. The primary costs associated with papyrus scrolls were typically categorized into raw materials, labor, and storage. The price of papyrus fluctuated based on the annual harvest, with a typical roll of papyrus costing approximately 2 to 3 deben, a unit of weight equivalent to around 91 grams. Labor costs were significant, with skilled scribes earning upwards of 10 deben per month for their services, while unskilled laborers working in the papyrus fields received about 3 to 5 deben per month. The financial records were often inscribed on clay tablets, detailing expenditures and revenues, and were meticulously catalogued within administrative offices. In terms of personnel, the hierarchy involved in the archiving of papyrus scrolls was structured yet specific. At the apex were the head scribes, known as royal scribes, responsible for overseeing the entire documentation process. These individuals were typically well educated, having received training in hieroglyphics, hieratic script, and other forms of writing. Beneath them were the junior scribes, who executed the actual writing on the scrolls. Their job descriptions included copying texts, recording financial transactions, and maintaining the integrity of existing documents. The junior scribes were often tasked with the organization of scrolls within storage facilities, employing a systematic cataloging method that involved cross-referencing content with a designated index. Support staff, such as laborers and apprentices, were also integral to the archiving process. Laborers were involved in the harvesting and processing of papyrus, while apprentices, who were often young boys, learned the trade under the tutelage of experienced scribes. This apprenticeship typically lasted several years, during which the apprentice would gain familiarity with the tools of the trade, including reed pens and ink made from carbon black mixed with water and a binding agent. The technical specifications of the tools and materials used in the crafting of papyrus scrolls were also of great importance. The writing instruments, primarily reed pens, were crafted from the abundant reeds found along the Nile, particularly the Arundo Donax, which was known for its flexibility and ease of manipulation. These pens were cut to a length of approximately 20 centimeters and had a tapered point suitable for fine writing. The ink used was a crucial component of the documentation process. The primary ingredients included soot or carbon black, which was mixed with water and a binder such as gum arabic, derived from the sap of acacia trees. The resulting ink was thick and durable, allowing for clear legibility on the papyrus surface. The ink's application was often a delicate process, requiring great skill to ensure that characters were rendered accurately and without smudging. Scribes would use a controlled hand, applying consistent pressure to the reed pen to achieve the desired line thickness, which typically ranged from 0.5 to 1 mm. In summary, the history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines, although seemingly mundane, reveals a complex interplay of construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial management, personnel organization, and technical specifications. Each of these elements contributed to a robust system that ensured the preservation of knowledge and culture, underscoring the critical role that documentation played in ancient society. The meticulous attention to detail and the adherence to established protocols not only facilitated effective record-keeping but also laid the groundwork for future generations to build upon and learn from the accumulated wisdom of their predecessors. The construction methods and materials employed in the manufacturing of papyrus scrolls during the ancient Egyptian period were integral to the overall archiving process. Papyrus, which is derived from the pith of the Cyperus papyrus plant, flourished along the banks of the Nile River. The harvesting of this plant typically occurred during the summer months, particularly between June and August, when the stalks reached their optimal height of approximately 3 to 4 meters. This timing was crucial, as it coincided with the annual flooding of the Nile, which provided the water necessary for the growth of the papyrus plant. Once harvested, the outer green rind of the papyrus stalk was stripped away, revealing the inner white pith. This inner section was then cut into long, thin strips, usually about 1 to 2 centimeters wide. The strips were laid side by side on a flat surface, creating the first layer of the scroll. After this, additional strips were placed on top in a perpendicular fashion, forming a crisscross pattern. This method of layering not only enhanced the strength of the material but also allowed for a smoother writing surface. The stacked layers were then pressed together, often using a heavy stone or wooden block, to expel excess moisture and bond the strips. Following the pressing process, the papyrus sheets were dried in the sun, which could take anywhere from a few hours to a couple of days, depending on the weather conditions. Once dried, the sheets were smoothed out, and any imperfections were trimmed away. The final product was a flexible, yet sturdy, writing material. A single scroll could consist of multiple sheets glued together, creating lengths that could reach up to 10 meters or more. In addition to the practical aspects of papyrus production, the historical context of its use is noteworthy. The earliest known references to papyrus date back to around 3000 BCE, during the early dynastic period of Egypt. Papyrus was not only a writing surface but also a medium for recording important religious texts, administrative records, and literary works. The famous Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and incantations intended to assist the deceased in the afterlife, was often inscribed on papyrus scrolls. By the time of the New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, papyrus had become the preferred material for writing, overtaking older options such as stone and clay tablets. One notable example of the use of papyrus scrolls is the Rosetta Stone, discovered in 1799, which provided the key to deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphs. Though the stone itself is made of granite, the inscriptions that were typically found on papyrus scrolls allowed scholars to understand the language and culture of ancient Egypt. The scrolls were often categorized and stored in libraries, such as the Library of Alexandria, which was one of the most significant libraries of the ancient world. This library is said to have housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls, many of which were written on papyrus and contained works of literature, philosophy, and science. Moreover, the decline of papyrus as a primary writing material can be traced to the rise of parchment made from animal skin around the 4th century CE. Parchment proved to be more durable and could better withstand the test of time, leading to a gradual shift in writing practices. However, papyrus remained in use in certain areas, especially for religious and ceremonial purposes, well into the Byzantine period. In addition to its use in Egypt, papyrus spread to other parts of the Mediterranean and was utilized by ancient Greeks and Romans. Historical records indicate that the Greek philosopher Aristotle wrote extensively on papyrus scrolls in the 4th century BCE, and the Roman poet Virgil's works were recorded on papyrus as well. The global trade of papyrus also flourished, with shipments being sent from Egypt to various parts of the Roman Empire, demonstrating the material's significance beyond its geographical origin. In summary, the intricate processes involved in the production of papyrus scrolls, along with the historical context of their use, underscore their importance in ancient Egyptian society. The meticulous methods of harvesting, processing, and crafting papyrus not only provided a means of documentation but also played a vital role in the preservation of knowledge and culture for centuries. The legacy of papyrus scrolls continues to resonate today, as they represent a foundational element of written communication and the recording of human thought. The tedious history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines. Part 6: Regional Variations and Comparisons. The archiving of papyrus scrolls in ancient Egypt was not a monolithic enterprise. Rather, it exhibited significant regional variations influenced by local customs, administrative practices, and environmental factors. In the north, particularly in the Nile Delta, home to cities such as Alexandria, the abundance of papyrus due to favorable growing conditions lent itself to a more prolific production of scrolls. Alexandria, as a center of learning and commerce, developed a sophisticated archiving system that reflected its status as a cultural hub. The Great Library of Alexandria, for instance, was renowned for its vast collection of scrolls, which necessitated meticulous cataloging and preservation protocols. In contrast, southern regions, such as Upper Egypt, exhibited a more utilitarian approach to scroll archiving. Here, the emphasis was often on practicality over aesthetics. The local administrative bodies might prioritize the documentation of agricultural yields, taxes, and land ownership over the philosophical or literary pursuits favored in the north. Consequently, scrolls from these regions often featured a more rudimentary organizational structure, with less emphasis on decorative elements and more on the clear conveyance of information. The differences in archiving practices also extended to the materials used for cataloging. In the north, where wealth allowed for more luxurious practices, colored ink and intricate illustrations were common, while in the south, black ink on plain parchment sufficed. The variations in regional practices underline a broader understanding of how geography and local culture shaped the priorities and methodologies of scroll archiving. Part 7: Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of papyrus scroll archiving in ancient Egypt can be categorized into distinct periods, each characterized by its own innovations and challenges. During the early dynastic period, circa 3100 to 2686 BCE, the archiving of scrolls was rudimentary. The focus was predominantly on record-keeping for administrative purposes, such as the tally of livestock and grain, which were essential for the nascent state's economy. The primary method of record-keeping involved the use of simplistic hieroglyphs inscribed directly onto the papyrus sheets, with little attention paid to the organization of these records. As we transition into the Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE, the significance of scrolls began to increase, as did the sophistication of archiving protocols. This period saw the emergence of more complex administrative systems, necessitating a more methodical approach to cataloging. Scribes became increasingly vital to the process, receiving specialized training in the art of hieroglyphics and the proper handling of papyrus. The introduction of standardized formats for scrolls allowed for easier navigation of records, and innovations such as the use of seals for authentication began to take hold. The Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, marked a further refinement in archiving practices. The period is noted for a burgeoning interest in literature and philosophy, leading to an influx of texts that required careful organization and preservation. The establishment of state-sponsored libraries and archives became more common, with bureaucratic regulations beginning to emerge that dictated the conditions under which scrolls were stored and maintained. This era also introduced the practice of creating comprehensive catalogs, which detailed the contents of various scrolls and facilitated easier access for scholars and officials alike. By the time of the New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, the archiving of papyrus scrolls had reached a level of complexity that mirrored the sophistication of the society itself. The use of indices, cross-references, and thematic catalogs became prevalent, reflecting an understanding of the importance of information accessibility. The introduction of papyrus rolls, scrolls that could be unrolled to reveal long texts, also transformed how information was recorded and retrieved. The meticulous attention to detail in the organization of scrolls during this period underscored the growing recognition of their cultural and historical significance. Part 8: Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. As the practice of archiving papyrus scrolls solidified, so too did the bureaucratic regulations that governed it. Ancient Egypt developed an intricate legal framework surrounding the creation, storage, and transfer of scrolls, reflecting the state's desire to maintain control over knowledge and information. The role of the vizier, often regarded as the highest-ranking official after the pharaoh, was critical in establishing these regulations. The vizier would oversee the administration of archives and ensure compliance with laws that dictated how scrolls were to be produced and preserved. One notable regulation involved the requirement for scribes to receive formal training before engaging in the production of official scrolls. This was a significant step in standardizing the quality of records, as it sought to eliminate inaccuracies that could arise from untrained individuals attempting to document complex information. Additionally, laws mandated that all scrolls pertaining to state affairs be stored in designated archives, which were often situated within temple complexes or administrative centers. These archives were secured against theft and environmental damage, with specific guidelines on how to maintain optimal conditions for papyrus preservation. The codification of laws also extended to the transfer of scrolls. Scrolls, particularly those containing sensitive or confidential information, could not be shared haphazardly. Procedures were established to ensure that any transfer of scrolls was documented, often requiring the signing of a contract or the use of seals to legitimize the transaction. These regulations served to protect the integrity of the scrolls and maintain the authority of the state over the information contained within them. Part 9: Supply Chain and Logistics. The supply chain and logistics surrounding papyrus scroll production and archiving are often overlooked, yet they are critical components of the broader archiving protocols. The procurement of papyrus, primarily harvested from the wetlands of the Nile, constituted the first step in the process. Papyrus was cultivated by skilled farmers who understood the seasonal cycles of the Nile and the optimal conditions for growth. The harvesting was a labor-intensive process that required careful timing to ensure the best quality of the reeds. Once harvested, the papyrus was taken to processing facilities, where it was cut into strips, soaked, and pressed to create sheets. This process involved a series of meticulous steps, including the removal of the outer green rind and the flattening of the inner pith, which was then laid out to dry in the sun. The logistics of transporting these processed sheets to scribes and archivists were carefully coordinated, often involving the use of waterways and caravans for overland transport. The distribution of scrolls was further complicated by the need for specialized inks and writing instruments. Black ink, derived from carbon, was commonly used for general purposes, while other colors were reserved for specific contexts. The sourcing of these materials, along with the production of reed pens, added another layer to the supply chain. Scribes were often reliant on local markets for their materials, which necessitated a network of suppliers who could provide high-quality inks and writing tools. Part 10: Record-Keeping Methods. The methods of record-keeping employed by ancient Egyptian scribes reveal a fascinating interplay of art, precision, and practicality. The act of inscribing hieroglyphs onto papyrus was not merely a mechanical task, it was imbued with a sense of artistry that reflected the culture's reverence for written language. Scribes utilized various tools, including reed pens and palettes, to create texts that were both legible and aesthetically pleasing. The careful arrangement of hieroglyphs, along with the use of decorative borders and illustrations, transformed many scrolls into works of art. In addition to the physical act of writing, scribes employed various organizational strategies to ensure the accessibility of information. The use of headings and subheadings within scrolls allowed for quick navigation, while the inclusion of tables of contents at the beginning of scrolls became a standard practice over time. Cross-referencing between different scrolls also emerged, with scribes noting relevant connections in the margins. This practice was particularly important for legal and administrative documents, where the ability to trace relationships between records was essential for effective governance. Moreover, the methods of preserving and maintaining scrolls evolved over time, with careful considerations given to environmental factors such as humidity and light exposure. It was common for scrolls to be stored in climate-controlled environments, such as shaded areas within temples or archives, to minimize deterioration. The implementation of protective coverings, often made from linen or leather, also became standard practice, reflecting a growing understanding of the need to protect these valuable records from physical damage. In conclusion, the history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines is a rich tapestry woven from regional variations, bureaucratic regulations, logistical considerations, and meticulous record-keeping methods. Each aspect, while seemingly mundane in isolation, contributes to a broader understanding of how information was valued, preserved, and utilized in one of history's most remarkable civilizations. The attention to detail afforded to the archiving of scrolls not only ensured the survival of knowledge through the ages but also reflected the cultural identity of ancient Egypt itself. As we continue to explore this tedious history, we uncover the complexities and nuances that define the legacy of papyrus scroll archiving, a practice that remains foundational to our understanding of the ancient world. ### The tedious history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines, Part 7. ### Regional variations and comparisons. The ancient Egyptian civilization, known for its monumental architecture and rich cultural tapestry, also exhibited significant regional variations in the practices of papyrus scroll archiving and cataloging. These variations stemmed not only from geographical factors but also from the differing administrative practices of local nomarchs, the governors of the nomes or districts of Egypt. In Upper Egypt, particularly in Thebes, the papyrus scrolls tended to be archived in more elaborate structures, often within temple complexes dedicated to the gods. The priests, who were the primary custodians of knowledge, developed a unique cataloging system that emphasized religious texts and hymnals. Their meticulous record-keeping included notations regarding the scroll's condition, such as slight wear at the edges or ink fading, requires restoration. This practice contrasted sharply with Lower Egypt, where commercial and administrative records predominated. Here, in bustling centers like Memphis, papyrus scrolls were often stored in more utilitarian facilities, typically overseen by scribes who primarily focused on economic transactions, tax collections, and grain inventories. In regions such as the Fayum Oasis, the unique agricultural abundance influenced the types of documents archived. The local administrative offices preserved a significant volume of records related to irrigation systems and crop yields, often accompanied by detailed maps drawn on papyrus. The comparison of these regional practices highlights not only the diversity of archiving protocols but also the socio-economic factors that shaped the content and form of records preserved over millennia. #evolution over different time periods. The evolution of papyrus scroll archiving in ancient Egypt can be categorized into several distinct periods, each characterized by notable shifts in administrative practices and cultural priorities. During the early dynastic period, circa 3100 to 2686 BCE, the archiving of documents was rudimentary, primarily consisting of simple inscriptions on clay tablets and a nascent form of papyrus scrolls. Most records were ephemeral, often discarded after their immediate utility had expired. With the advent of the Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE, the use of papyrus became more widespread, coinciding with the enhancement of bureaucratic structures. The construction of monumental tombs necessitated the preservation of religious texts and rituals, which were meticulously catalogued by scribes. Each scroll was assigned a unique identifier based on its content and purpose. The inventory of the sacred scrolls, for instance, was an early example of a cataloging system that would evolve into more complex databases. The Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, marked a significant shift towards a more formalized archiving protocol, spurred by increased trade and contact with neighboring civilizations. Papyrus scrolls began to include legal documents, decrees, and records of international treaties, reflecting the growing complexity of governance. This period saw the emergence of a more standardized format for scrolls, which included headers that specified the date of creation and the scribe responsible for the document. The New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, further sophisticated these practices, as the administrative apparatus expanded and diversified. The establishment of specialized offices for record preservation, such as the House of Books, became commonplace. Here, Scrolls were categorized not only by subject matter but also by their frequency of use. Commonly accessed texts were stored in accessible locations, while less frequently referenced documents were relegated to secondary storage areas. The meticulous archiving protocols of this period showcased an evolution driven by the intersection of administrative necessity and cultural preservation. #Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The bureaucratic regulations governing the archiving of papyrus scrolls in ancient Egypt were complex and multifaceted, often reflecting the interplay between religious, economic, and administrative imperatives. The establishment of the Great Office of the Scribes during the Old Kingdom set the foundation for formal regulations pertaining to the creation, preservation, and cataloging of documents. This office was responsible for the oversight of all scribes, ensuring compliance with established protocols. One of the most significant regulations was the mandate that all official documents be written in hieratic script, a simplified form of hieroglyphics designed for efficiency and clarity. This requirement was not merely a stylistic preference, it had legal implications as well. Documents written in the appropriate script were deemed valid and could be used as evidence in court. The penalties for non-compliance were strict, ranging from fines to the disqualification of the offending scribe from future administrative duties. Additionally, laws concerning the preservation of religious texts were particularly stringent. The Book of the Dead, for example, was not just a collection of spells and prayers but a key component of the funerary tradition. Copies of this text were required to be preserved in a manner that ensured their survival for eternity. As such, the papyrus scrolls containing these texts were often stored in sacred spaces, with specific rituals performed to bless and protect them. The evolution of these regulations over time reflected shifts in power dynamics, particularly during periods of foreign rule, such as the Hyksos invasion. The resultant syncretism led to the incorporation of foreign administrative practices, which prompted a re-evaluation of existing archiving methods and regulatory frameworks. Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of papyrus supply and distribution played a critical role in shaping the archiving landscape of ancient Egypt. Papyrus, derived from the Cyperus papyrus plant, was predominantly cultivated in the marshy regions of the Nile Delta. The cultivation and harvesting of papyrus were labor-intensive processes that required careful planning and execution. During the inundation season, when the Nile flooded its banks, papyrus was harvested in large quantities. The logistics of transporting this material to urban centers involved a complex network of waterways, with papyrus bundles often transported on boats. Scribes and archivists had to maintain relationships with local farmers and traders to ensure a steady supply of quality papyrus. The quality of the material could vary significantly, with finer grades reserved for important documents and religious texts, while coarser varieties were utilized for mundane records. Moreover, the distribution of papyrus across different regions necessitated a sophisticated supply chain. Scribes in Thebes might receive shipments from the Delta, leading to potential variances in the quality and characteristics of papyrus used in different locales. This regional disparity not only affected the physical quality of the scrolls but also influenced the stylistic practices of scribes, as local customs and preferences emerged. The introduction of centralized storage facilities, particularly during the New Kingdom, helped streamline the logistics of papyrus management. These warehouses allowed for the bulk storage of both raw papyrus and completed scrolls, facilitating better inventory control and minimizing losses due to spoilage or environmental factors. Record-keeping methods. Record-keeping methods employed by ancient Egyptian scribes were remarkably sophisticated, especially when considering the technological limitations of the time. The primary tool for recording information was the reed pen, which was used to inscribe ink onto the smooth surface of papyrus. The ink itself was produced from a mixture of soot, water, and a binding agent, typically gum arabic, which ensured that the inscriptions adhered well to the papyrus. Scribes often employed a variety of techniques to enhance the readability and durability of their records. For instance, they experimented with different styles of writing, including cursive hieratic for everyday documents and more formal hieroglyphics for ceremonial texts. The use of color-coded inks also emerged as a method of organization. Black ink was typically reserved for standard text, while red ink was used for headings and important annotations. The organization of records was often achieved through the use of tabulation and indexing systems. Scribes would sometimes create summary tables on the margins of scrolls, providing quick reference points for longer texts. Additionally, the implementation of sequential numbering for scrolls in a collection allowed for easier retrieval and cross-referencing, an early precursor to modern database management systems. The meticulous nature of these record-keeping methods underscores the importance of documentation in ancient Egyptian society. The preservation of knowledge was viewed not just as a practical necessity but also as a sacred duty, ensuring that the wisdom of the past would guide future generations. In conclusion, the history of papyrus scroll archiving in ancient Egypt is a testament to the civilization's complex interplay of regional practices, evolving bureaucratic regulations, logistical challenges, and innovative record-keeping methods. Each layer of this history reveals a nuanced understanding of the importance of documentation in maintaining social order, cultural continuity, and administrative efficiency. The dedication to preserving knowledge through papyrus scrolls ultimately reflects the broader values of ancient Egyptian society, where the written word held both practical and spiritual significance. The tedious history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines. Part 8: Regional Variations and Comparisons. The practice of archiving and cataloging papyrus scrolls in ancient Egypt exhibited significant regional variations, driven by local customs, administrative practices, and the accessibility of papyrus resources. While the overarching framework of papyrus production and usage can be traced to the Nile Valley, the distinct cultural and political climates of Upper and Lower Egypt led to divergent methodologies in record-keeping. In Upper Egypt, characterized by its mountainous terrain and proximity to the quarries of stone used in monumental architecture, the bureaucratic systems tended to prioritize agricultural records. This emphasis was necessitated by the agrarian nature of the economy, which relied heavily on the annual inundation of the Nile. Consequently, the archiving protocols in this region often included detailed accounts of crop yields, irrigation practices, and labor contributions. Scribes engaged in the meticulous documentation of these records employed a standardized format, marked by a series of hieroglyphic symbols that denoted quantities, types of crops, and labor distributions. Conversely, in Lower Egypt, where the fertile Nile Delta provided a different agricultural landscape, the focus of archival practices shifted. The proximity to trade routes and urban centers influenced the cataloging of commercial transactions, including trade agreements, tax collections, and inventory lists of goods. This regional variation is exemplified in the use of papyrus scrolls for the documentation of trade partnerships with neighboring cultures, such as the Nubians and the Canaanites. The scrolls produced in this region often contained elaborate illustrations and annotations, reflecting the professional artistry of the scribes and their engagement with the broader Mediterranean world. It is also noteworthy that the regional dialects employed in written communication contributed to the variations in archival practices. For instance, while the hieratic script was commonly used in administrative contexts across Egypt, the demotic script became prominent in Lower Egypt as a means of simplifying administrative documentation. This evolution in script usage further highlights the nuanced approaches to papyrus scroll archiving across different regions. Part 9: Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of papyrus scroll archiving in ancient Egypt can be segmented into several distinct periods, each marked by significant developments in administrative complexity and the evolution of writing technologies. During the early dynastic period, circa 3100 to 2686 BCE, the nascent bureaucratic systems began to emerge, relying heavily on oral traditions for record-keeping. Nonetheless, the introduction of hieroglyphics allowed for the first inscriptions to be made on papyrus, signaling the beginning of a formalized approach to documentation. As we transition into the Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE, the establishment of a centralized administration necessitated a more systematic approach to record-keeping. The development of standardized forms and templates, often inscribed on papyrus, became commonplace. This period also saw the emergence of specialized scribal schools, where aspiring scribes were trained in the art of writing and the intricacies of archiving protocols. The pedagogy of these institutions included the meticulous copying of existing scrolls, reinforcing the importance of accuracy and consistency in record-keeping. The Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, marked a further evolution in administrative practices. The introduction of the Middle Kingdom's more complex legal codes necessitated a corresponding advancement in archival methods. Legal documents, including contracts and property deeds, became increasingly common, and the archives began to reflect a wider array of societal interactions. The role of scribes evolved from mere record keepers to legal professionals, deeply embedded in the bureaucratic framework of the state. In the New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, the flourishing of trade and military conquests expanded the scope of documentation beyond administrative records. The introduction of foreign languages and scripts into the archival practices of Egypt reflected the cultural exchanges resulting from trade and conquest. This period also experienced the proliferation of literary and religious texts on papyrus, which required new cataloging systems to manage the increasing volume of scrolls. The emergence of specialized libraries, such as the one at Thebes, underscored the importance of organized archival repositories in the management of knowledge. Part 10. Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. The bureaucratic regulations governing papyrus scroll archiving are a testament to the complexity of ancient Egyptian administration. Various decrees and edicts issued by pharaohs and high-ranking officials dictated the standards by which scrolls were to be produced, maintained, and stored. The legal framework surrounding these regulations was intricate, with particular attention paid to the preservation of records related to taxation, land ownership, and military service. One notable edict from the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, circa 1386 to 1349 BCE, mandated the establishment of a centralized archive for the storage of state documents. This archive was to be overseen by a chief scribe, whose responsibilities included the implementation of standardized cataloging procedures and the safeguarding of sensitive information. The regulations stipulated that all scrolls must be inscribed with a date and the name of the scribe, ensuring accountability and traceability within the archival system. In addition to these overarching regulations, local officials were often empowered to create supplementary laws that pertain to their specific regions. For instance, in areas with extensive agricultural activity, local edicts might require the documentation of seasonal crop cycles and labor allocations. This decentralized approach to regulation allowed for a degree of flexibility in archival practices while maintaining a cohesive structure across the broader administrative framework. Furthermore, the enforcement of these regulations often fell to a network of inspectors, known as the Eyes of the Pharaoh, who were tasked with ensuring compliance among scribes and local officials. This system of oversight served to reinforce the importance of accurate record-keeping as a means of preserving the stability and integrity of the state. Part 11. Supply Chain and Logistics. The supply chain and logistics of papyrus production and scroll archiving were central to the functioning of the ancient Egyptian economy. Papyrus, derived from the Cyperus papyrus plant, was cultivated primarily in the marshy regions of the Nile Delta. The process of harvesting papyrus was labor-intensive, requiring skilled workers to cut and process the stalks into sheets suitable for writing. Once harvested, papyrus was transported to urban centers where scribes and artisans would prepare the material for use. The logistics of this supply chain involved a series of intermediary steps, including the treatment of papyrus sheets to ensure durability and flexibility. Scribes employed various techniques to create smooth writing surfaces, including the application of a mixture of water and gum to the sheets, followed by pressing them under heavy weights. The transportation of papyrus sheets was facilitated by a network of waterways and overland routes. Boats, constructed from papyrus reeds themselves, were commonly used to navigate the Nile and its tributaries, while donkeys and oxen provided overland transport. The establishment of trade routes with neighboring regions further expanded the availability of papyrus, allowing for the import of higher quality materials from regions such as the Levant. Moreover, the logistics of scroll production involved the coordination of multiple labor forces, including harvesters, transporters, scribes, and archivists. This interconnected web of labor was essential for maintaining the steady supply of papyrus necessary to meet the demands of an increasingly bureaucratic society. The efficient management of these resources was crucial, as delays in production or transportation could result in significant disruptions to the archival processes. Part 12. Record-keeping methods. The methods employed in record-keeping evolved considerably throughout the history of ancient Egypt, reflecting the changing needs of society and the increasing complexity of governance. The earliest forms of record-keeping were predominantly oral, relying on mnemonic devices and traditional storytelling. However, with the advent of writing technologies, particularly the development of hieroglyphics and later scripts such as hieratic and demotic, the archiving of information transitioned to a written format. The process of record-keeping involved several key steps: the initial drafting of documents, the review and approval by higher authorities, and the final archiving of scrolls. Scribes were often tasked with creating multiple copies of important documents to ensure redundancy and safeguard against loss. This practice was particularly critical for legal texts, which required precise language and adherence to established formats. In terms of physical organization, scrolls were typically housed in designated storage spaces known as houses of books. These repositories were constructed with careful attention to environmental factors, such as temperature and humidity, to preserve the integrity of the papyrus. Scrolls were often rolled and stored in wooden or clay containers to protect them from insects and moisture. Additionally, the cataloging of scrolls was a meticulous process, often employing a system of labeling that included the title of the work, the author's name, and a brief description of the contents. Scribes utilized a standardized format for these labels, ensuring consistency across the archival system. The practice of cross-referencing scrolls with administrative records further enhanced the reliability of the cataloging process. In conclusion, the history of papyrus scroll archiving in ancient Egypt is a testament to the sophistication of their bureaucratic systems and the intricate interplay of regional practices, evolving methodologies, and regulatory frameworks. From the early days of record-keeping to the establishment of complex archival protocols, the meticulous nature of these practices laid the groundwork for the preservation of knowledge in one of the world's earliest civilizations. The legacy of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving continues to inform contemporary archival practices, echoing through the ages as a symbol of the enduring human desire to document and preserve the collective memory of society. The tedious history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines, a continuation. Regional variations and comparisons. The archiving of papyrus scrolls in ancient Egypt was not a monolithic practice. Rather, it exhibited significant regional variations influenced by local customs, administrative needs, and environmental factors. The Nile River, as the lifeblood of Egyptian civilization, created distinct ecological zones that in turn fostered divergent approaches to record-keeping and archival practices. In Upper Egypt, particularly in cities such as Thebes and Aswan, the papyrus was often utilized for both administrative records and religious texts. The priests of Ammonius at Karnak, for example, maintained extensive archives detailing temple finances, offerings, and ritual practices. These records, meticulously inscribed on papyrus, were stored in dedicated facilities known as House of Life, Piarmat, where they were overseen by scribes trained in the sacred arts of hieroglyphics. The focus on religious texts in this region meant that the cataloging systems were often more elaborate, with scrolls categorized not only by administrative function but also by their spiritual significance. Conversely, in Lower Egypt, particularly in the bustling urban centers of Memphis and Alexandria, the emphasis shifted towards economic and legal documentation. The commercial boom in these areas necessitated a more pragmatic approach to archiving. Legal contracts, tax records, and trade agreements filled the scrolls, reflecting the dynamic trade networks that connected Egypt to the broader Mediterranean world. Here, the archiving protocols were often less concerned with the religious context of the documents and more focused on ensuring accessibility and retrieval efficiency. The cataloging systems in Lower Egypt were characterized by their brevity and straightforwardness, often employing a simple numerical system to denote scrolls, which could be quickly referenced by bureaucrats. The regional variations in archival practices also extended to the writing materials themselves. While papyrus was the predominant medium throughout Egypt, the quality and thickness of the papyrus sheets varied significantly based on local production capabilities. In regions where the papyrus plant was abundant, such as along the Nile Delta, scrolls tended to be thicker and more durable, whereas in more arid regions, thinner sheets were more common, impacting their longevity and the methods employed for storage. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of papyrus scroll archiving in ancient Egypt can be segmented into several distinct periods, each characterized by shifts in political structure, cultural influences, and technological advancements. The early dynastic period, circa 3100 to 2686 BCE, saw the nascent development of record-keeping practices, primarily focused on administrative and agricultural documentation. The use of papyrus was still in its infancy, with records often inscribed on stone or wood. However, by the Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE, the introduction of papyrus as a dominant medium for documentation led to a burgeoning of archival practices. During the Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, the expansion of bureaucracy necessitated more sophisticated cataloging systems. The establishment of centralized government offices led to the creation of standardized forms and templates for recording transactions. The emergence of the official scribe role during this period also marked a significant evolution, as these trained professionals began to develop more systematic methods for archiving scrolls, including the use of seals and stamps to denote authenticity and ownership. The New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, represented the zenith of papyrus scroll archiving, as the wealth generated from military conquests and trade allowed for the production of high-quality scrolls. The volume of records produced during this time was staggering, and the bureaucratic apparatus grew increasingly complex. Noteworthy is the introduction of the archival box, S3, which provided a means of physically organizing scrolls in a manner that facilitated easier access without compromising the integrity of the documents. This period also witnessed a heightened emphasis on the preservation of historical records, leading to the establishment of dedicated state archives. In the late period, c. 664 to 332 BCE, following the fragmentation of the Egyptian state, archival practices became more decentralized. Local authorities began to adopt their systems, often borrowing from foreign influences, particularly as a result of Persian and later Hellenistic incursions. While the administrative efficiency of earlier periods waned, the regional variations in archiving practices flourished, as local scribes adapted their methods to suit the needs of their communities. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The bureaucratic framework governing papyrus scroll archiving was intricately intertwined with the legal standards of ancient Egypt. The regulation of documentation was codified in a series of decrees and laws that established protocols for the creation, preservation, and destruction of papyrus records. The role of the vizier, as the highest-ranking official in the Egyptian administration, was pivotal. He issued edicts that dictated the procedures for handling archival materials, ensuring that they were treated with the utmost respect and formality. One notable regulation was the requirement for all official documents to be inscribed in hieratic script, a cursive form of hieroglyphics, to ensure uniformity and prevent fraud. This legal stipulation extended to the archiving process, mandating that all scrolls be catalogued in a manner that included the date of creation, the name of the scribe, and a brief summary of the document's contents. Such regulations were crucial in maintaining the integrity of the archives, particularly in cases of disputes or audits. The destruction of records was also subject to strict regulations. Scrolls deemed obsolete were not to be discarded indiscriminately; instead, they had to be ceremonially burned or buried, often accompanied by rituals to appease the gods and ensure that the knowledge contained within was not lost to the afterlife. This legal framework reflected the Egyptians' deep-seated belief in the power of words and the importance of preserving knowledge for future generations. Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of papyrus scroll archiving involved a complex supply chain that encompassed the cultivation of the papyrus plant, the processing of raw materials, and the distribution of finished scrolls to various administrative centers across Egypt. The cultivation of papyrus was primarily located along the Nile, where the plant thrived in the marshy banks. Seasonal flooding of the river played a crucial role in the annual harvesting cycle, as the waters would inundate the fields, allowing for the growth of new papyrus shoots. Once harvested, the papyrus stalks were processed through a labor-intensive method that included cutting, soaking, and pressing the strips into sheets. The quality of the resulting papyrus varied based on the skill of the workers and the methods employed during processing. The finished sheets were then dried and smoothed to create a suitable writing surface. This production process was often overseen by a master scribe or a guild of scribes, who ensured that the quality of the papyrus met the standards required for official documents. The distribution of papyrus scrolls was facilitated by a network of transport routes along the Nile and via overland paths. Scribes and bureaucrats relied heavily on a cadre of laborers and boatmen to transport scrolls between cities, often accompanying them in official caravans. The logistics of this transport were complicated by the need for careful handling to prevent damage to the delicate scrolls, which could easily be torn or stained. Moreover, the burgeoning trade networks established during the New Kingdom meant that papyrus was not just a local commodity, it was often exported to neighboring regions. This interregional trade necessitated the development of standardized sizes and qualities of papyrus scrolls, further influencing the archiving protocols as scribes adapted their practices to accommodate both local and foreign demands. Record-keeping methods. The methods employed for record-keeping in ancient Egypt were as diverse as the documents themselves. The primary tools for inscribing records were reed pens, which were dipped in ink made from soot and other natural materials. The skill of the scribe in controlling the pen was paramount, as the clarity and precision of the inscriptions directly impacted the legibility of the scrolls. In terms of organization, the most common method was the use of scrolls rolled around a central rod. This cylindrical form allowed for easy storage and transport, but it also posed challenges in terms of cataloging. Scribes often employed varying techniques to denote the contents of a scroll, including the use of colored inks, decorative borders, and even the inclusion of summary inscriptions on the outer layer of the scroll. The practice of creating a title scroll at the beginning of a document became increasingly common, providing immediate context and facilitating quicker access. In some cases, scrolls were stored in wooden cases or boxes, particularly those of significance to state affairs or religious practices. The use of seals, made from clay or wax, was another innovation that emerged during the New Kingdom to secure scrolls and indicate authenticity. These seals often bore the insignia of the official or deity associated with the document, further contributing to the bureaucratic integrity of the archives. In conclusion, the evolution of papyrus scroll archiving in ancient Egypt was marked by a complex interplay of regional variations, bureaucratic regulations, logistical challenges, and evolving recording methods. This tedious history reflects not only the practical concerns of record-keeping but also the cultural values and societal structures that underpinned one of the world's earliest civilizations. The attention to detail in both the creation and preservation of these scrolls serves as a testament to the Egyptians' reverence for knowledge and their desire to document their legacy for future generations. The tedious history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines, Part 10. Regional variations and comparisons. The utilization of papyrus scrolls in ancient Egypt was not merely a matter of convenience but was deeply intertwined with regional practices and local customs. This variation in the use and management of papyrus scrolls can be observed distinctly between the two primary regions of Upper and Lower Egypt. The Nile River, serving as both a lifeline and a divider, played a crucial role in shaping these regional differences. In Lower Egypt, particularly in cities such as Memphis and Alexandria, the administrative apparatus was more centralized and hierarchical. The scrolls produced in this region often adhered to a standardized format, which was influenced by the influx of Greek practices following the conquests of Alexander the Great. The meticulous archiving practices here lean heavily on the use of ink derived from carbon black, which provided a striking contrast against the beige background of papyrus, making documents easier to read and categorize. The scrolls were frequently rolled on wooden dowels, a practice that facilitated easier transport and storage in the grand libraries that characterized Hellenistic Alexandria. Conversely, Upper Egypt maintained a more localized approach, often influenced by the traditional practices of the ancient Egyptians. The scrolls from regions such as Thebes reflected a divergence in both content and style. The writing in Upper Egypt often employed a more cursive form of hieroglyphics, which was adapted for speed and efficiency in writing. This regional variation is emblematic of the broader cultural differences that emerged as a result of geographical separation. Furthermore, the papyrus used in Upper Egypt was sometimes of lower quality, which could necessitate more frequent replacements, thus influencing the cataloging and archiving practices as records were often updated or recopied. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of papyrus scroll archiving protocols across the dynastic periods of ancient Egypt reveals a fascinating trajectory influenced by political, economic, and cultural changes. During the Old Kingdom, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE, the administrative record-keeping was rudimentary at best. Documents were primarily limited to royal decrees, tax records, and religious texts. The scrolls from this period often featured simple, straightforward cataloging methods, primarily focusing on essential information without extensive elaboration. However, as we transition into the Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, a notable shift occurs. The burgeoning bureaucracy necessitated a more sophisticated approach to record-keeping. The introduction of more complex bureaucratic systems led to the establishment of archives in temples and governmental buildings. It was during this time that protocols began to emerge, which stipulated the need for systematic cataloging based on the type of document. A more nuanced understanding of record categorization took shape, with scrolls being organized by thematic relevance, including religious, administrative, and economic categories. By the time we reach the New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, the archival practices had reached unprecedented levels of complexity. The introduction of the concept of the archive became a formalized practice, leading to the establishment of dedicated spaces for the storage of papyrus scrolls. These archives were often monitored by a cadre of scribes, whose sole responsibility was to ensure the integrity and organization of these scrolls. This period witnessed the emergence of cataloging systems that utilized both numerical and alphabetical classifications. In addition, the role of the scribe evolved from mere record-keeper to a more prestigious position within the social hierarchy, emphasizing the importance of literacy and documentation. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The evolution of papyrus scroll archiving cannot be divorced from the bureaucratic regulations and laws that govern the use of written materials in ancient Egypt. The role of the state in regulating the production and archiving of documents was paramount. Legal texts, such as the decrees issued by pharaohs and officials, meticulously outlined the protocols for maintaining records. These decrees often included specifications regarding the types of documents to be archived, the required materials for writing, and the proper methods for storage. For instance, the famous law code attributed to Pharaoh Djoser from the Third Dynasty emphasized the importance of maintaining records related to taxation and land ownership. Non-compliance with these regulations could result in severe penalties, including the loss of property or status. The meticulous enforcement of these laws ensured that the bureaucratic machinery of ancient Egypt operated smoothly, further embedding the importance of papyrus scrolls within the administrative framework. Moreover, the emergence of specialized positions, such as the chief scribe or overseer of the granaries, signified the increasing complexity of record-keeping. These officials were tasked with ensuring adherence to the established protocols, often requiring extensive training in both the art of writing and the nuances of bureaucratic procedures. In addition, the legal framework surrounding papyrus production became increasingly stringent, with laws governing the quality of papyrus and the qualifications of scribes. Supply chain and logistics. The supply chain of papyrus, from harvesting to the final archiving of scrolls, was an intricate web of processes that reflected the economic landscape of ancient Egypt. Papyrus was primarily sourced from the marshy areas along the Nile, where the plant thrived in abundance. The process of harvesting papyrus involved a labor-intensive methodology, where workers would cut the stalks, remove the outer layer, and slice the inner pith into thin strips. These strips would then be laid out in overlapping layers, pressed, and dried under the sun to form sheets suitable for writing. Once the papyrus sheets were produced, they entered a complex logistics network that included transport via riverine routes to various production centers, such as Memphis and Thebes. The transportation of these materials was often facilitated by a fleet of boats, which navigated the Nile's currents, bearing not only papyrus but also ink and other writing materials. The cost of transporting papyrus was significant, and as such, the proximity to papyrus-producing areas often dictated the location of administrative centers and libraries. The distribution of papyrus scrolls was further complicated by the burgeoning demand for written materials, particularly during periods of expansion or cultural exchange. The influx of foreign scribes and scholars, especially during the Hellenistic period, necessitated the establishment of a more robust supply chain that could accommodate increased production. This led to the rise of specialized workshops dedicated to the production of papyrus scrolls, often employing skilled artisans who refined the quality and finish of the sheets. Record-keeping methods. The methods of record-keeping in ancient Egypt were as diverse as the content of the scrolls themselves. The primary medium for writing was the reed pen, which, when dipped in ink, produced a fluid and expressive script that varied in style depending on the purpose of the document. For instance, administrative records often employed a more angular and precise version of hieratic script, while literary works might showcase a more cursive and flowing style. The archiving of documents was guided by a series of unwritten yet widely accepted practices. Once a scroll was completed, it would often undergo a review process where a senior scribe would verify the accuracy and completeness of the content. This quality assurance was pivotal, as the integrity of records could have significant implications for administrative decisions and legal matters. Once verified, documents were assigned a unique identifier, which could consist of a combination of numerical and alphabetical codes, aiding in their retrieval. Scrolls were typically stored in wooden boxes or shelves made from durable materials designed to protect them from the elements. In more elaborate archival systems, scrolls were sometimes catalogued using a rudimentary indexing system, whereby a master scroll would list other scrolls by category and location. The methods of record-keeping also extended to the use of seals and signatures, which served not only as a means of authentication but also as a demonstration of the status and authority of the document's creator. The presence of a seal indicated that the document had been vetted and approved by a higher authority, thus lending it an air of legitimacy. In conclusion, the history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines is a compelling tapestry woven from the threads of regional diversity, bureaucratic regulation, logistical complexity, and meticulous record-keeping methods. As we delve deeper into this fascinating subject, it becomes abundantly clear that the mundane aspects of everyday documentation played an integral role in shaping the very fabric of ancient Egyptian civilization. The legacy of these practices continues to influence our understanding of history and the importance of preserving knowledge for future generations. The meticulous nature of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines has often been a subject of academic inquiry, yet there remains a considerable void in our understanding of the intricate details and minor historical figures involved in this laborious process. While prominent figures such as Imhotep and royal scribes have received due attention, it is essential to explore the less celebrated contributors to this vast enterprise, the specific case studies that illustrate the evolution of these practices, and the broader implications of such protocols in comparative contexts with other ancient civilizations. ###Minor historical figures and their roles. Among the myriad of scribes and minor officials who played pivotal roles in the archiving processes, the figure of Tiamat stands out. Active during the 18th dynasty, approximately 1550 to 1295 BCE, Tiamat was a low-ranking scribe whose contributions have gone largely unrecognized in mainstream narratives. His primary duty involved the organization of legal texts and administrative documents. In a letter dated to the year 1450 BCE, Tiamat writes, "Behold, the scrolls have been arranged according to subject matter, but I beseech thee, send more to fashion new scrolls, for the weight of our knowledge grows heavy." This humble request illustrates the continuous need for new materials as the volume of recorded knowledge expanded. The role of scribes like Tiamat was not merely clerical, it involved a profound responsibility for preserving the cultural and administrative heritage of ancient Egypt. Their contributions were critical in ensuring the longevity of documents that detailed everything from agricultural records to religious texts. Another figure of note is Nefertari, a lesser-known royal scribe, who operated during the reign of Ramses II, 1279 to 1213 BCE. Nefertari's work primarily focused on the cataloging of temple inscriptions and the archiving of royal decrees. In her own words, transcribed from a now-lost scroll, she stated, "To catalog the words of the gods is to honor their divinity, may my hand never tire, for the scroll must endure where the flesh shall not." This sentiment captures the reverence that ancient scribes had for their work, viewing it as a sacred duty to preserve knowledge for future generations. #Specific case studies with dates. One notable case study highlighting the evolution of papyrus scroll archiving protocols is the discovery of the Papyrus of Ani, dating to around 1250 BCE. This scroll is among the most famous examples of an Egyptian Book of the Dead and provides insight into the practices of archiving sacred texts. The papyrus was meticulously organized, with sections dedicated to spells and prayers intended to assist the deceased in the afterlife. The scroll measures approximately 78 feet in length, demonstrating the expansive nature of religious archiving. Upon examination, scholars noted that the papyrus bore signs of a systematic cataloging method, with distinct sections separated by ornate illustrations. This indicates that there was a conscious effort to not only preserve the content but also to enhance its accessibility and aesthetic value. The cataloging of such scrolls likely followed a protocol where items were registered in a central archive, perhaps overseen by a chief scribe who maintained an overarching inventory. Another significant case is the Great Harris Papyrus, which dates to the reign of Ramses IV, circa 1155 to 1149 BCE. This lengthy document encompasses a variety of administrative records, including tax assessments, labor agreements, and tribute lists. The sheer size of the papyrus, at over 130 feet, necessitated a comprehensive cataloging approach. Each section was labeled according to its content, with cross-references to related documents, indicating an advanced level of organizational sophistication. The process of archiving such extensive material would have required a team of scribes working collaboratively, adhering to strict protocols that dictated the format and organization of the scrolls. In an inscription from the same era, a scribe noted, "Let no scroll remain unmarked. In the chambers of knowledge, order reigns supreme, lest chaos ensue." ### Comparative analysis with other regions. When one examines the papyrus archiving practices of ancient Egypt in comparison to those of Mesopotamia, a notable divergence in methodology and material usage emerges. The Sumerians and Akkadians, for instance, utilized clay tablets for record keeping, a medium that, while durable, lacked the flexibility and ease of transport afforded by papyrus. Their archiving protocols often involved cuneiform script, which, while sophisticated, was cumbersome compared to the hieratic and demotic scripts employed by Egyptian scribes. The differences in archival practices can also be viewed through the lens of cultural priorities. While Egyptian archives often emphasized religious texts and the afterlife, Mesopotamian records were primarily administrative, focusing on trade and governance. This divergence is reflected in the content of the archives. Egyptian papyri reveal a preoccupation with the metaphysical, while Mesopotamian tablets are replete with economic transactions. The following quotation, ostensibly from a Mesopotamian scribe, encapsulates this sentiment: "To record the grain harvested is to secure the future, the gods favor those who count." This highlights a practical approach to archiving that contrasts sharply with the spiritual motivations behind Egyptian practices. Archaeological findings and interpretations. Archaeological discoveries have provided significant insights into the protocols surrounding papyrus archiving in ancient Egypt. The cache found in the ruins of the ancient city of Tebtunis, dating back to the Ptolemaic period, circa 305 to 30 BCE, contains over 100,000 fragments of papyrus. These documents encompass a wide array of texts, from administrative records to literary works, showcasing the diversity of content that ancient scribes were responsible for archiving. Scholars have interpreted these findings as evidence of a systematic approach to archiving that involved categorization by subject matter, date, and relevance. The presence of numerous administrative documents suggests that the archiving protocols were closely tied to the functioning of the state, ensuring that vital information was preserved for governance and taxation. Moreover, the discovery of the Tebtunis archive has sparked discussions regarding the transition from papyrus to parchment in later periods. As the availability of papyrus diminished and the demand for archival material increased, the gradual shift to alternative materials reflects the adaptability of archival practices. A noted archaeologist, in a monograph published in 1998, remarked, "The evolution of archival materials mirrors the societal needs. As the sands of time shift, so too must the vessels of knowledge." Primary source quotations, invented but plausible. To further elucidate the inner workings of the archiving protocols, one can draw upon invented yet plausible quotations attributed to various scribes and officials throughout Egyptian history. These quotations not only serve as a narrative device but also provide insight into the mindset of those engaged in the archiving process. 1. Qiyamut, circa 1450 BCE, in the stillness of the scriptorium, the sound of reed upon papyrus is a symphony of eternity, each stroke a note in the grand composition of our civilization. 2. Nefertari, circa 1270 BCE, may this scroll, inscribed with the words of the ancients, find its place among the stars, for in its fibers lies the essence of our journey through time. 3. An anonymous scribe, circa 300 BCE, as I unroll the papyrus, I am reminded that our stories cling to the fibers like the breath of life. Let us preserve them, lest they fade into the abyss of forgetfulness. 4. A chief archivist, circa 250 BCE, the organization of knowledge is akin to the construction of a great pyramid. Each layer must be perfectly placed to ensure its longevity against the sands of time. These invented quotations encapsulate the reverence and dedication felt by those involved in the archiving process, providing a glimpse into their worldview and the importance they placed on preserving their civilization's knowledge. Conclusion. In conclusion, the tedious history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols is a testament to the dedication of numerous minor historical figures, the evolution of practices through specific case studies, and the comparative analysis with other regions. Archaeological findings have illuminated the complexity of these protocols, while invented primary source quotations offer a window into the minds of those who dedicated their lives to the preservation of knowledge. The intricate detailing of these practices may seem tedious and monotonous, yet it underscores the importance of archival work in shaping the cultural and historical narrative of ancient Egypt. As we reflect on the meticulous nature of their protocols and the roles played by figures both prominent and obscure, we gain a deeper appreciation for the legacy of their efforts, which continue to inform our understanding of their civilization even in the present day. Thus, as we delve into the layers of this history, we find ourselves wrapped in a narrative rich with detail, perhaps sufficient to induce a slumber deeply entwined in the annals of time, where the whispers of ancient scribes continue to echo through the ages. The history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines is a fascinating yet often overlooked aspect of historical documentation practices. Within this realm, several minor historical figures played crucial roles, contributing to the elaborate systems that governed how knowledge was preserved, organized, and accessed in ancient Egypt. One such figure, Amenhotep, a lesser-known scribe from the 18th dynasty, is documented to have served in the Temple of Karnak around 1425 BCE. His meticulous attention to detail in the organization of temple records is evidenced by several fragments of papyrus discovered in his burial site. These fragments contain annotations that suggest a systematic approach to archiving religious texts and administrative documents. In one instance, Amenhotep notes, "The scrolls of the divine oracles shall be placed in the second chamber, next to the records of offerings." This document emphasizes the hierarchical nature of archival organization, where religious texts were prioritized over mundane administrative records. Moving forward in time, during the reign of Ramses II in the 13th century BCE, the use of papyrus scrolls expanded to encompass not only religious and administrative documents but also literary works. The cataloging of such scrolls became essential, particularly with the establishment of the Royal Library at Thebes. The library, though not as grand as its later counterparts in Alexandria, served as a critical repository for the knowledge of the time. The librarian, a position filled by a series of scribes, was responsible for the systematic classification of scrolls. One notable librarian was Hori, who served under Ramses II. Hori's contributions are highlighted in a tablet inscribed with the following: "All scrolls shall be categorized by subject, literature in the northern section, law in the central, and medicine to the south." This quote reflects the early attempts at creating a systematic cataloging protocol, which would later influence other civilizations. Specific case studies provide additional insight into the evolution of papyrus scroll archiving. One such case is the discovery of the Cairo Geniza, dated to approximately the 9th century CE. Although this period is post-pharaonic, it reveals significant continuity in archiving practices. The Geniza, a storeroom for worn-out religious texts, illustrates a tradition of preservation in the Egyptian context. Archaeologists unearthed thousands of fragments that include personal letters, legal documents, and religious manuscripts. The meticulous organization of these materials indicates a long-standing commitment to preserving written works. One particular fragment, dated to 1050 CE, contains a letter that states, "The scrolls of my forefathers must not perish in the dust, but shall be preserved for generations." Such expressions underline the cultural value placed on written records throughout Egyptian history. Comparative analysis with other regions reveals similarities and differences in archival practices. In Mesopotamia, for instance, clay tablets served as the primary medium for documentation. The use of cuneiform writing established a different set of protocols for archiving. While Egyptian papyrus scrolls allowed for a more flexible and lightweight approach to documentation, the heavier clay tablets necessitated different storage solutions. The Assyrian Empire, known for its extensive libraries, utilized cataloging systems that involved physical placement within the library, often organized by topic but less fluid than the Egyptian system, which allowed for easier access and transport of scrolls. Archaeological findings have further elucidated the methodologies employed in ancient Egyptian archiving. For example, excavations at the site of Oxyrhynchus, which began in the late 19th century, unearthed a wealth of papyrus documents ranging from administrative records to literary works. Among the findings were cataloging lists that detailed the contents of various scrolls, with annotations indicating their location within the storage areas. One such list, dating to the 3rd century CE, reads, Scroll 47, a treatise on the art of medicine, is to be found within the second crate of the eastern shelf. This practical approach to cataloging allowed for efficient retrieval and preservation of knowledge. The role of primary sources in reconstructing the history of papyrus archiving cannot be overstated. Invented yet plausible quotations from ancient scribes offer further insight into the practices of the time. For instance, a scribe named Khonsu, active around 1200 BCE, is purported to have stated, "The scrolls must be guarded as one guards the heart, the wisdom contained within is the lifeblood of our civilization." This quote encapsulates the reverence held for written knowledge in ancient Egypt and underscores the perceived necessity of preserving such documents for future generations. In addition to the reverence for knowledge, there were practical challenges faced by those involved in the archiving process. The climate of Egypt, while conducive to the preservation of papyrus due to its arid conditions, also posed risks. The potential for deterioration due to exposure to moisture or pests necessitated the development of protective measures. Documents were often stored in wooden chests or clay jars, and specific protocols dictated the conditions under which scrolls were to be kept. For instance, records indicate that scrolls depicting sacred texts were to be safeguarded from the elements, and laid to rest in chambers devoid of light. Such protocols indicate an early understanding of preservation techniques that would later evolve into more sophisticated methods. The timeline of papyrus scroll archiving protocols in ancient Egypt spans several millennia, reflecting changes in political power, cultural values, and technological advances. From the early dynastic period through the Ptolemaic era, the evolution of these practices saw significant shifts. The introduction of the Greek language and culture during the Ptolemaic period led to a blending of Egyptian and Hellenistic archiving practices. This fusion is particularly evident in the establishment of the Library of Alexandria, which sought to compile all known knowledge, including that recorded on papyrus scrolls and other mediums. In this context, the protocols adopted by Egyptian archivists evolved to accommodate a broader array of subjects and languages. The interplay between archiving and the socio-political landscape of ancient Egypt is evident in the case of the Temple of Edfu. Inscriptions from the temple, dating back to 237 BCE, reveal that priests maintained detailed records of offerings, rituals, and temple expenditures. These records were essential not only for religious purposes but also for maintaining the temple's economic stability. A notable inscription reads, "Let the scrolls of the temple's wealth be kept under the watchful eyes of the priests, for they are the foundation of our offerings." This underscores the dual role of archiving in both religious and economic spheres. As the decline of ancient Egyptian civilization approached, the protocols for archiving began to show signs of fragmentation. The Roman occupation brought about changes in administrative practices, which often overlooked traditional methods of cataloging. The introduction of Latin and the shift in bureaucratic structures led to a decline in the meticulous nature of earlier archiving practices. For example, the Roman administration at the time of Augustus around 30 BCE simplified many processes, which often resulted in the loss of the rich historical context that had characterized Egyptian archiving. In conclusion, the tedious history of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines is a complex tapestry interwoven with minor historical figures, specific case studies, comparative practices, archaeological findings, and primary source quotations. This extensive exploration reveals a dedication to the preservation of knowledge that transcended generations and cultural shifts. While the details may be dry and the narrative somewhat tedious, the importance of these practices in shaping the historical narrative of ancient Egypt cannot be understated. The commitment to archiving serves as a testament to the value placed on knowledge, a value that resonates even in contemporary society, where the preservation of information remains a cornerstone of civilization. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our tranquil journey through the meticulous and fascinating world of ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll archiving protocols and cataloging timelines. We have traveled through time, exploring the delicate artistry and profound importance of these scrolls that have carried the knowledge and stories of a civilization long past. From the early days of recording thoughts on papyrus to the sophisticated systems developed for preserving and organizing vast libraries of scrolls, we have uncovered the dedication and ingenuity of those who valued the written word so deeply. As we reflect on the meticulous processes implemented by ancient scribes, we can appreciate not only their commitment to preserving history but also the serene beauty that lies in the art of cataloging. Each scroll, with its unique ink and careful script, represents a whisper from the past, a reminder of the thoughts, dreams, and aspirations of those who came before us. It is a gentle reminder that, much like these ancient texts, our own stories are woven into the fabric of time, deserving of careful preservation and understanding. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this soothing exploration. I hope this narrative has offered you both knowledge and a sense of calm, allowing you to drift away on the soft tide of history and reflection. As you find yourself settling into a comfortable space, remember that you can always replay this gentle journey to revisit the serene tales of ancient Egypt and the remarkable dedication to archiving that shaped our understanding of the past. As you close your eyes tonight, may your mind be at ease, free from the burdens of the day. Picture yourself in a quiet library filled with scrolls, the gentle rustle of papyrus echoing softly around you, wrapping you in a warm embrace of tranquility. Let the soothing rhythm of your breath guide you into a deep, restorative sleep, where dreams can unfold like ancient stories, rich with wisdom and peace. Good night, dear listeners. May you find rest and renewal in the quiet embrace of the night, and may each moment of slumber bring you closer to the serenity you seek. Sweet dreams await you, and the whispers of history shall always be there, waiting to guide you back whenever you wish to return. Sleep well.